Hello and welcome back. In this video, what I'm going to be covering here is now that we've added these joints, and I just turned those off visibility wise, but now that we've added these joints into the skeleton and into the bind, we've also gone through and adjusted our weighting, so we have some decent weighting in the fingers. We want a way to control that where we don't have to grab the individual joints and rotate those, but have those set as attributes of an additional little hand control here. So let me turn off the joints so that's a little bit easier to see. And so what we're going to be making here is something like this left finger control, where we have individual controls for index, middle, and ring and pinky and thumb. And so to curl all of those, but also kind of some extra attributes for a fist control, as well as a spread attribute. And these can all be used in combination too. So you can, if we want to, we could bring down that fist part way, spread it a little bit. Maybe adjust index and middle to open those up a little bit, and you get some pretty natural hand shapes pretty quickly using some basic controls like this. So let's go ahead and zero that out, and let's make one of these for this hand over here. All right, so the first thing that I need to do is create an object that can hold these attributes. I'm going to avoid adding attributes to this human IK rig that we created using the quick rig, just because this is a set number of attributes here, and I don't want to modify this rig to avoid breaking it or complicating any of the stuff under the hood. So instead, I'm going to isolate this to its own control. But in this case, I have that control just follow along that wrist control, so it's always by the hand. All right, so to do that, I'm going to create a NURBS primitive circle. And that circle is going to be created at the origin, as we'd expect, but we're going to point snap it, just holding V, point snap it up to a point on the arm here, and then scale it up. I'll hit F to frame, and then we'll pull this up into place. We can do a mirrored duplicate using the kind of self-grouping trick like we did with the eyes or with the hand joints. So we can make an exact copy of this, but it's not that important. It's really just here to hold those attributes. So as long as it's generally placed in the same area, we should be fine. All right, now that we have that placed, we'll give it a name. So this other one was left finger control, so we call this right finger control. It's control 1 because I have a pre-made copy on a layer here that I've hidden. But just to show you how we'd set this up first before I jump over that copy, I would zero out my transformation, so freeze transformations. I could also delete history on that curve. And go ahead and parent that up to this this right hand effector. So it's going to follow along with that. Let me try to freeze out because it looks like it inherited some of those transformations. Let me try to zero that out again. All right, so just had to zero out or freeze those transformations after I parented that up. And let's just make sure that that is, yeah, okay. We're good there. All right, so now we got to add some attributes like we had over here. So this index curl, middle curl, ring curl, all those. And so the way we're going to do that is with the object selected here, we'll go to Edit and Add Attribute. And so we'll give these names here. So we'll call this index curl. And we'll leave it at float because we want it to scale kind of between 0 and 10. And so we'll set those values here, 0 and maximum set to 10. If we wanted to, interesting, iTunes just decided to start playing some music for me. Cool. Awesome. Let's close that out there. Anyways, so if we wanted to, we could certainly set this to the minimum value of, a negative if we wanted to maybe have some, hyperextension the other direction. But in this case, I just want to go from default to kind of fully curled. So that should be good there. And we'll go ahead and hit add. Notice that it adds it now to the bottom of the stack, and it also separates it into a nice, easy to read name there as well. So I'll call this next one middle curl. We'll do the same thing, minimum value of 0, maximum value of 10, and add. And we'll go through and do that for the rest of our attributes. Again, just leaving it a float, and then 0 to 10, and add. And so I go through and add the rest of those attributes. And then I would take these things we aren't using, because we don't want to have to, we want to keep this clean to just what this control is going to be used for. So we don't want to, give our animator or ourselves the opportunity to go move this around, scale it, lose it somewhere. So we're going to lock and hide these extra channels. So translate, rotation, and scale. We'll go ahead and lock and hide selected. So that's just going to move those out of the stack, which is nice, and it's going to lock those as well. All right, so I continue adding attributes here, and I'm going to go ahead and add this to its own layer and hide that. And so that's what I've already done with this extra copy here. So I've added these attributes already, and this is my right finger control. And what I can do here, just to make sure, so these are already, some of these are hooked up, so just want to see which ones are. It looks like I just did the index so far on this, so we can pick up with the middle finger. So let's do that. Let's go middle curl is our next one to hook up, and the way we're going to do that is with something called set driven key. So that's under your animation menu, and key, and then set driven key and set. Now it's going to bring up this window here, and we're going to have this selected. We're going to load driver. This is the control that's going to drive the animation of our joints. So let's show those joints again. And we want this, because we're going to concentrate on middle curl here. We want this to drive the animation of our middle finger joints. And so I'm just going to select those three, because those are the ones that I'm actually going to be rotating here. And with that middle curl selected at the top, we're going to load these three selected joints as the driven. So now we load driven, and now those are in the bottom under right middle 5, 6, 7. We're going to select all of those and select all the rotation channels, because this rotation might not just be limited to just Z here. And we want to tweak that shape a little bit, so have all three selected. All right. So with this, we're zeroed out in our rotations here, and we need to set an initial state for this. So we have our right finger control, and middle curl is set at 0, and these joints are at 0 rotation. So we'll go ahead and set key. So we have these selected and these selected. We'll key that. So its initial state, notice this turns pink to show that it has it now an incoming connection with the set driven key. So now we have the initial default state set, and we need to have kind of the active state set. So to do that, we're going to go to this middle curl value, and we're going to up that to 10. And then back over here, make sure these things are still selected, and we're going to go into our joints. I'm just going to Q to drop the handle for a second, and then go back into my rotation tool. And then we can rotate those until that looks pretty good. And that, don't want it to interpenetrate the hand there. And that's looking pretty good. We could test that out with this this control here. You can select that and test the index curl to make sure. And we got some weighting issues. I just got to mirror over my weights from the other side, but that looks pretty good. There's minor interpenetration, but not bad. And so we're good there. Let me just drop index curl back down to 0. And so we have these now in the active state. We have the middle curl up to 10. just move that value before you set key. Move it first before you change the joint values, because the joints now have keyframes on them from the set driven key. And so just like in the time slider, if when you move that around when there's a key, it's going to snap back to its keyed state. So if we slid this slider around right now, it would snap these back to their only keyed state, which is at default. So we'll make sure that middle curl value is maxed out before we rotate these. All right, so now that's maxed out. We have our rotation at full, and we'll go ahead and hit key again. So middle curl selected, rotation channels for these 3 joints selected, key. All right, so now we'll go and test that attribute, and there you go, it works. And so my index curl is working as well. And so I'm going to quickly kind of go through and finish up the rest of these just so I can show you some of those extra attributes. So we're going to go over to ring curl here. We have our ring finger joint selected. We're going to load driven. We're going to select those, select the rotation channels, and hit key for default state. We're going to go into that ring curl attribute, max that out, go back into these joints, and rotate those into place. So we're just getting a maximum value. Again, if we want to, we can go in here and test how those other curls work with that. And in this case, I'm thinking that maybe this needs to kind of curve in a little bit. And so we can adjust these. We don't have to stick strictly to the z-axis. So that looks okay there. And so then back out. Our ring curl is set to 10. We have the new maximum state. These are all selected, and we hit key. So we're going to test that ring curl out, and that works. Again, my weighting, just need to mirror that over. And so I'm going to leave that maxed out as I focus on the pinky. So again, we'll select these 3 joints, and we'll load driven. We're going to be driving the rotation channels. All right, so we'll key this with pinky selected. Just make sure that we're zeroed out there. Good. And we key our default state. We're going to max out the pinky value. And then we're going to go in to these 3 joints and rotate them into place. And so we got the full extension there. And here's a good example of why we probably be using more than just one rotational channel when we're setting these things, because as the fist closes up there, its fingers are going to kind of bend toward each other, and we can turn off, even though the weighting is a little off here, so we'll kind of disregard that, but as far as the position of the fingers, that looks pretty good. And so we'll go ahead and show joints one more time here. And then we're just going to make sure that we are maxed out on the pinky. Our pinky is selected. It's in the fully activated state. And we'll go ahead and key that. All right, we'll also do that with the thumb here. So we'll just load these 3 joints. We'll include the thumb base because you kind of need that to articulate that thumb around, create that fist shape. And so with that with this thumb joint selected, we're going to load driven. And it looks like I accidentally included this wrist effector instead of this joint, so let's fix that up. So this joint, shift click, these other 2 joints, and load driven. That's better. All right, so now we'll go and drive the thumb rotation, go to the thumb curl value, make sure that's zeroed out, and we'll go ahead and key that. Then we'll max out this thumb curl value, and we'll adjust this into place. Now the thumb is going to be a little bit trickier than the other fingers because it's not kind of rotating in such a specific axis overall. Kind of has multiple axes that it's articulating on, so we're going to kind of have to feel this out to get a decent shape here. And let's say that with some minor tweaks there, let's say that is good enough for us. Maybe bring that in a little bit more. It's a tiny bit of interpenetration, but not a big deal. Overall, the shape looks pretty good. And let's make sure that we maxed out that thumb curl value. Good. We have it all selected, and we'll go ahead and key that. All right, so now let's select all of these and open and close. Looks good, aside from some of that little skin weighting there. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick while we're thinking about it. I'll just select my character's mesh under rigging, skin, and mirror skin weights. We already have our options set up, so that should work fine. All right, so back in set driven key here, we'll just look at this control, and yeah, the weighting is looking better there. And so that is working now, cool. But instead of having to select all these controls, maybe we want to control all this from one attribute. In that case, we can take this finger control as the driver, and the finger control can also be the driven. And so we're going to have the rest of these. So the fist value is driving the index through thumb curl. And so they're all zeroed out. We'll go ahead and key that. And then we'll max all these values out. So 10 there, and then all these, max those out. And then we'll key that again. So now you have this fist attribute that can control kind of all of them. And you can kind of work between those. Maybe some, you want to modify this a little bit to have him kind of pointing or something. You can use a combination of the fist slider and index curl. And the only thing is that when we go back to that value, it's going to snap these back into place, but you can key out specific finger shapes using that as a starting off point. And then spread here. So let's see how that would work. So we'll zero out all these values, and then in spread, we just want something that's going to spread the fingers apart. So here we're going to just maybe select all of these joints, and maybe the thumb base and thumb palm too. And so we'll select all of these joints, load those as the driven. We'll go into their rotational values and select spread. And so just making sure that spread is zeroed out there, we're going to key its default state. Going to maximize this attribute to 10, and then we'll create the shape that we want. So the pinky gets pulled out quite a bit. The index finger also quite a bit, maybe not quite as much as the pinky. And I can actually probably push that a little bit further. Leave the middle finger kind of where it is. And then maybe this guy opens up a little bit, and maybe even this one as well. So we'll really spread that out quite a bit. That might be even a little bit more extreme than the other one I created, but that will work. And we have spread maxed out to value 10. We have our fingers posed and the proper thing selected here, so we'll go ahead and key. So now if we look at this, we have a controller that can control spread, has a full kind of fist attribute. Let me just turn off our joints here to see that a little bit better. Has this fist attribute. I can spread this out. And we have our individual curl controls as well. All right. So nice thing about this and I thought I had this parented up, but apparently not. So let's go ahead and do that. Oops, jumping off in space here. I should have had that parented up before I did this, but that's not a big deal. So if something like this happens, we want to have this kind of over here, the translation handle isn't going to matter because we're just holding attributes there. So if we want to move this back into place rather than getting those channels back and viewing those, Let's just go into the CVs and just bring those over into place. So we'll switch to our top view. And we'll just position that up. And then we'll go to our front view. And we can just bring those down into place at the same position as the other one. Using component mode is a good way to scale your controls after they've been hooked up. And then we'll go back to our perspective view. All right, so now it is going to follow this hand control. And we have these various attributes that we can use to control the hand pose. All right, so created a new controller to control these extra joints we've added to our character, and added some attributes to those, and some additional kind of specialty attributes, but that should give us a pretty good range of motion with which we can control our character's hands. And the same thing applies if we were to create an extra controller for something like a tail or other appendages. You could add attributes and use set-driven key to control the animation of those. All right, so I hope that was helpful, and until next time, take it easy.